We're going to open up the floor in just a couple minutes to you to ask questions of the panel. I'll go ahead and repeat your question. And please specify if it's to all the panel or any one person on the panel. But before I do, I'd like to ask one last question. And let's just keep this an open question. Feel free to jump in and try to keep your answers brief. Honing in on the Democrat and Republican primaries up to this point, to what extent have the debates shaped and molded the leading nominee on the Republican side, McCain, and the two remaining candidates on the Democrat side, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama?
I think that on the Democratic side, the debates for Senator Clinton and Senator Obama have been an opportunity to display their various strengths. And Senator Clinton obviously displays her skill. She's very adept with any kind of question. She, as John mentioned earlier, I think kind of can run circles around her opponents. She has an extreme amount of wit. And Senator Obama, you can see how uncomfortable debates make him, actually, and he has to spend pretty much the whole day preparing for him. But he does come off with his genuineness and his likability. I think voters notice that. I'm not sure that I can say much about how the debates have shaped Senator McCain, other than he did perform pretty well in the last one with Governor Romney on the war, the Iraq war.
Yeah, I think they were shaped, and this is going back to a theme. And on the Democratic side, the frontrunners were shaped because of how the moderators handled those debates, or cattle calls, as Frank calls them, and the fact that they raised so much more money than anybody else. They were considered the frontrunners. They were asked the most questions. Others were never going to get a fair shake. And even Edwards sometimes had to try to get in to debate and say, I'm here too, even when there was only 3 of them. He had to do that. Listen, John McCain in many ways, and I'll defer to Frank on this, of course, John McCain in many ways it has nothing to do with the debates. He's an accidental front runner in the sense that he was left for dead, but because the Republicans could not alight on any of the other candidates who had various infirmities, they came back to McCain. I don't think it had anything to do with the debates, but I may be wrong about that.
I think you're right. I mean, I really don't think the debates were a factor at all on the Democratic side. I mean, Hillary had such a tremendous lead. I don't think that Obama closed the race to make it as close as it is on the debates. I think he did it on the stump with his speeches, with his dynamism. I mean, he's the most incredible candidate I've seen in my political life. I mean, this guy is amazing. Charismatic is really a good word. John McCain, you're right. I mean, Charlie Cook, who's probably one of the smartest guys in Washington, who handicaps and follows you, said about John McCain, I actually repeated him when I gave a speech not too long ago. He said that McCain was gone. His only hope was what they call on Wall Street, there's a saying called a dead cat bounce. Dead cat bounce means if you throw a dead cat down, it'll bounce at least once. And the theory was that New Hampshire was the only chance to see if he would bounce. Well, guess what? The dead cat bounced very high. But I'll tell you who the debates did have. Huckabee. Huckabee in those debates came across as very likable. He's very articulate. He's very smart. He's got a tremendous sense of humor. And I think, he was fairly unknown. I think if you had to pick on both sides, someone who the debates really helped, I think it helped Huckabee. I don't think he's going to win, but what John said is, his basis was the evangelicals. And there's a lot of evangelicals, and 45% of the vote in Iowa was evangelical. That's where he did it. There was always skepticism among evangelicals about Mitt Romney, not only because of his position on issues, but because he's a Mormon. I mentioned this morning in Some Reporters that, those of us who live in Nevada, there's a large Mormon population, we know Mormons, we love them, we know what great families, they're great people. Tell you what, in the South, in the Bible Belt, they don't know about Mormons. And there's great skepticism. I'm asked all the time in Washington, what's Mormonism all about? Is it a sect? Is it a cult? I mean, serious. And that is a problem I don't think Mitt ever got over. And so what happened is the evangelicals needed someone to rally around. Fred Thompson was never awake during the primaries. I mean, they thought he was going to be the new Reagan. I mean, there's a guy who needed a shot of Geritol every moment. I I mean, what someone came up the other day.
Frank, how do you really feel about it?
Yeah. Well, you know, and said among the Republicans it was a case of electile dysfunction. Not getting excited about any of the Republican candidates, and that was the way it is.
Frank will be appearing tonight at 11 o'clock at the Nugget. All right, let's go ahead and open the floor now to all of you. Who would like to ask the first question? Go ahead and stand and ask away. Warren Lurley, right there.
I've got a question, Frank. You've all said that the moderators compete with they do away with grandstanders and so forth. What do you do, Frank, to try and guide or approach moderators who can't try and get
We don't do anything. When it's now we started something new 4 years ago, and that is that we take one debate, and the first debate this time will be focused on domestic policy, and the final debate will be focused on foreign policy. Now that doesn't mean if something that's really an issue on domestic policy comes along right before the foreign that you can't get into it. But we don't tell them anything. They pick their own questions. In the old days when it was supposed to be 50% foreign policy, 50% domestic policy, all they heard was a producer saying, all right, now you spent 10 minutes on domestic, you got to try to balance. That's it. They pick the questions. I mean, you're not going to get a Bob Schieffer and tell him what to say. I mean, they will participate, or a Jim Lehrer. And so we don't tell them anything. And that's why, as John says, they've got to be somebody who's followed the campaign, who understands where the positions have been of these campaigns. Hard work. I mean, Schiff told me last time, I mean, it was his first time to do one of these things. And we did it down, he did it at Arizona State. And I was backstage with him. He was nervous. And he said, this is a big deal. He worked very hard to refresh himself on the positions that these people had taken so that he could follow up and ask him, say, wait a minute now, Senator, that's not the position you took when you made a speech in Las Vegas, a month ago. You said this, and so it's hard work, but we trust them, and that's why the picking of who it is very important. We don't coach them or give them any leads.